Hello, I'm Karen Christensen, President of ACTS Retirement Life Communities. It is a pleasure to present you our 2021 Annual Report presentation, highlighting many of the organization's achievements that occurred over the past year. Despite the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, 2021 provided much to be proud of throughout the ACTS organization. Thanks to the dedication, commitment, and partnership of the entire ACTS family, our operating and financial performance remained strong, supporting the long-term viability of our organization and our mission. Jonathan Grant, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, and Sue Ahern, Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, will join me in reviewing our governance and leadership structure, an overview of the ACTS family of communities, our continued pandemic response, occupancy and operational highlights from last year, and our focus on workplace excellence. We will end the presentation in reviewing our financial performance for 2021 and the ways we expanded our mission and supported our ministry during the year. ACTS is a not-for-profit organization, and as such, there are no owners. ACTS is governed by a board of directors, whose members, other than Jerry Grant, our Chief Executive Officer, serve as volunteers without compensation. We are fortunate to have a dedicated and talented board of directors. At the end of 2021, the board was comprised of 14 individuals with diverse backgrounds and over 200 years of service to ACTS. In addition to their commitment to our mission, they provide extensive experience in areas that are of importance to our business, including healthcare, strategic planning, business operations and management, and finance. 2 past ACTS CEOs continue to serve our organization as a member of the board of directors, including Reverend George Gunn, who is also a resident at Brittany Point Estates. In addition to George, there are 2 other residents who are members of our board, including Robert Evans from Matthews Glen and Bruce Detweiler from Brittany Point Estates. I would also like to recognize and honor Anne Louise DeVenny, a resident at Fort Washington Estates who retired from the ACTS Board of Directors in December of 2021. We are grateful for her 11 years of dedicated service to ACTS and for the lasting impact she has had on the lives of residents and staff. Also during 2021, the board designated emeritus members, both honorary and active, in recognition of their outstanding service and contributions to the ACTS organization. Honorary emeritus members include Don Davis, a former chair of the ACTS board and now a resident at Normandy Farms Estates, and Merrill Moyer, a former board member who served as treasurer. The active emeritus members, who may participate on various board committees as we continue to benefit from their expertise and experience, include retired board members Dr. Donna Jacoby, now a resident at Azalea Trace, and John Marcheski. Just as we had changes within the board of directors, 2021 brought changes in our leadership team, including the retirements of Rick Winter and Ian Crichton. These provided for a number of well-deserved promotions and appointments. Sue Ahern, formerly Vice President and Controller, became the Chief Financial Officer. Peggy Valdivia, formerly the Corporate Director of Accounting, assumed Sue's previous role as Vice President and Controller. Jim Petty's position was realigned to include mission support, and Gary Ginter was promoted to Senior Vice President, Procurement and Contract Management. Additional changes have occurred in early 2022. As previously announced, Charlie Coxon retired on March 1st after 24 years of dedicated service. Charlie did exactly what great leaders do, prepared his successor. As such, Jonathan Grant was promoted to Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer, filling Charlie's role. This allowed for the promotion of Jeremy Neely to Senior Vice President, Community Operations, which provided for the transfer of Steve LaPierre to the Northeast region, returning closer to his home in Allentown, Pennsylvania. We congratulate Sue, Peggy, Jim, Gary, Jonathan, Jeremy, and Steve as they begin the next chapter of their ACTS careers. Each of these individuals are members of Management Council, which includes 25 individuals who faithfully serve the organization under the leadership of Jerry Grant, ACTS's CEO. Members of Management Council include executive vice presidents and senior vice presidents who provide guidance and supervision for all areas of business within the organization. These include community operations led by Jonathan Grant. Glenn Fox is our general counsel, leading our legal, compliance, risk, and procurement departments, and Jeff Kane serves as chief administrative officer, overseeing human resources, ACTS Corporate University, ACTS Legacy Foundation, and other administrative functions. Other areas of senior vice president level oversight include finance, human resources, procurement, real estate services, technology, health and clinical services, strategy and mission development, marketing, and sales. Vice presidents provide additional leadership in the areas of finance, construction services, technology, sales, hospitality and restaurant services, and resident health services. Vice presidents of operations provide direct support and direction to our communities, which are grouped together as regions, which were realigned and reduced to 4, commensurate with the other changes in operational leadership. All members of Management Council are deeply committed to the mission and success of ACTS, responding to their personal call to serve through their dedicated and tenured service with the ACTS organization. Collectively, we have served ACTS for over 475 years, an average of 19 years each. As you all likely and hopefully know, this year we are celebrating ACTS's 50th anniversary. The organization was founded through the vision and commitment of a pastor of a church to provide housing and high-quality care for its senior members of the congregation. Our first community opened in 1972 in the backyard of that church in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania, where they both remain today. With the quick success of that first ACTS community, 4 additional communities were built in Pennsylvania that same decade, and the organization also decided to venture out of state and build its first community in Florida, St. Andrews Estates in Boca Raton. In the 1980s, 2 additional communities were built in both Pennsylvania and Florida, and we entered another state with the development of Matthews Glen in Matthews, North Carolina. During the 1990s, the organization adjusted to its rapid growth while adding its 8th community in Pennsylvania and a 2nd community in North Carolina. As we entered the 2000s, industry consolidation through affiliations, also called sponsorship transitions, provided a new growth option and strategy. We completed the last community we developed, which is Lanier Village Estates in Gainesville, Georgia, and we completed our first affiliation with an existing community, which is Azalea Trace in Pensacola, Florida. Since that first affiliation in 2003, we have added 11 other communities to the ACTS family in the states of South Carolina, Alabama, Delaware, Maryland, and New Jersey. Collectively, we are a family of 26 communities with under 7,000 employees serving over 10,000 residents. ACTS remains the 3rd largest not-for-profit senior living organization in the country, based on our number of units, which continued to change slightly compared to the prior year, largely reflective of our commitment to enhance privacy in our Willowbrook Court skilled care centers, converting many semi-private rooms to private rooms within our communities as we continue to enhance our life care services. In November 2021, we announced a new form of strategic growth in alliance with Willow Valley Communities. Willow Valley Communities is a Pennsylvania not-for-profit corporation that has been serving seniors since 1984 and primarily operates 3 communities in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, with more than 2,500 residents. The alliance, which commenced on May 1, 2022, brings the two organizations together in a mutually beneficial relationship and enhances the ability of both organizations to serve seniors and advance our shared missions. As part of the alliance, Willow Valley Communities remains a separate legal entity with its own board of directors, management team, and brand. As such, Willow Valley Communities is a sister organization to ACT's Retirement Life Communities, which is the legal entity that includes the majority of the ACT's communities, as we do have a history of merging affiliates into ACT's Retirement Life Communities after certain criteria is met. The remaining affiliate communities are listed on the left and include Heron Point in Chestertown, Maryland, Westminster Village in Spanish Fort, Alabama, the Evergreens in Morristown, New Jersey, and Integrace, which includes 3 communities in Maryland, Bailey Chase, Buckingham's Choice, and Fairhaven. Supporting entities are listed in the middle. The companies that support the ACT's communities include ACT's Management Services, which provides management, marketing, and development services. ACT's Signature Community Services, which includes our home health, hospice, and physician services. And ACT's Legacy Foundation, which supports our philanthropic efforts. Willow Valley Living, also listed in the middle, provides management and marketing services to Willow Valley Communities. Willow Valley Communities and related entities are shown on the right, again as a sister organization to ACT's Retirement Life Communities, not as an affiliate. It is now my pleasure to introduce Jonathan Grant, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you, Karen. Hello, I'm Jonathan Grant, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. I am so pleased to participate in this presentation and share with you highlights of 2021. Starting first with our continued pandemic response. Although we would all like to say the coronavirus is behind us, our COVID-19 efforts continued throughout 2021. Some highlights of our efforts included the continuation of providing vaccines and booster clinics for residents and employees in all of our communities, as well as rapidly responding to the 2 COVID variant surges of both Delta and Omicron. We are proud of our leadership and how they effectively managed staffing and supply levels despite the national labor shortage and supply chain issues, allowing us to continue to focus on safely reopening our communities and reinstating our services. The continued focus on managing the coronavirus was very important in meeting the needs and desires of current residents, but also for new residents, as we constantly strive to both keep our occupancy levels high while maintaining our community operations, some of which I would like to highlight for you now. Across the ACT's family of communities, we have a history of high occupancy levels in independent living. Occupancy remained strong through the pandemic and was just over 91% at the end of 2021. While a slight decrease compared to the prior year, it exceeds the industry average. According to a recent analysis from Ziegler, CCRC occupancy levels were 85.7% by the end of 2021. When including units committed and selected, ACT's consolidated occupancy improved to 94% at the end of the year. The slight reduction in overall occupancy in independent living units was due to turnover exceeding the number of move-ins. Although a turnover of almost 12% seems slightly higher than usual, it is not completely unexpected since our turnover in 2020 was lower than anticipated. It is notable that we saw a 13% increase in move-ins during 2021, even though the pandemic continued post-vaccinations and booster shots. A positive sign for the future is that the number of prospective residents on the priority list remains strong at just over 2,800. Looking at the healthcare center, occupancy is slower to recover from the effects of the pandemic. There was a decrease in the annual average occupancy in Oak Ridge Terrace to just over 72%. However, occupancy steadily improved throughout 2021, ending the year at 73.4%. The 75.6% annual average occupancy in Willowbrook Court increased over prior year as it's experiencing faster recovery. As Karen stated, the reduced utilization has provided the opportunity to enhance privacy in Willowbrook Court, reflective in the decrease in available units. The number of private or partially private rooms across the ACTS organization now accounts for almost 80% of all Willowbrook Court beds. As our communities continue to deal with the pandemic, they also continue to undergo state surveys. Our average number of deficiencies decreased in 2021 compared to the prior year, averaging only 2.6 deficiencies per survey, which is significantly below the national average of 8.2. Our survey results are a component of the CMS 5-star rating, along with other criteria. All 25 of our Willowbrook courts are rated a 4 or 5-star. This provided for an overall rating of 4.8, significantly above the national average of 3.1. We owe a tremendous amount of gratitude to our employees who continue to demonstrate a strong commitment to our mission and support our objective to provide hospitality, engagement, high-quality services, and care to all of our residents. There are a number of ways we seek to recognize our employees for their service to ACTS. The most prestigious employee award we have is the President's Award, which honors employees for exceptional service and commitment to loving kindness. In 2021, 6 employees were selected for this award. Collectively, these 6 individuals have provided distinguished service for almost 90 years to the ACTS organization. Another way we recognize employees is through longevity awards. We know that our employees contribute significantly to our success, so each year we celebrate hundreds of employees that reach benchmark anniversaries. Our culinary and operations teams did a wonderful job in making the 2021 celebrations as special and memorable as possible under the circumstances. We recognized 667 employees for 5 years to 45 years of service. Collectively, these employees have provided 7,560 years of service to ACTS. With that type of longevity, we are fortunate to have a low employee turnover rate, much lower than the industry average. Our strategic goal set by the Board of Directors is 15%, but we knew the pandemic and labor crisis would impact our numbers. We continue to respond with many different strategies to help us recruit and retain employees, and we appreciate your support of all of our efforts. Many of our technology advancements will support our recruitment and retention efforts. The new applicant tracking system will make the hiring and onboarding process easier. We're implementing new scheduling software that makes it easier for both the supervisor and the employee to announce and pick up an open shift. We're expanded our Connected Worker initiative to keep the workforce engaged and gain efficiencies. We're also exploring the use of robots and automation. We're also improving our resident experience with technology advancements. We're upgrading our technology infrastructure to support a higher level of internet speed, coverage when you're outside walking around the campus, and resident check-in. Some of our communities are piloting smart apartments and a resident app. We've also implemented a new culinary point of service system. We place great importance on providing a positive, rewarding, and safe work environment for our employees. Our employee satisfaction and engagement is key to the success of our organization. In 2021, we completed an employee survey, and we're proud that ACTS scored more favorably than the national benchmark, including areas of employment engagement and diversity and inclusion. Fundamental to our culture of loving kindness is supporting short and long-term strategic goals for diversity and inclusion efforts within the areas of recruiting, hiring, promotions, training, and leadership development. It is now my pleasure to introduce Sue Ahern.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hello, I'm Sue Ahern, Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of ACTS. In the annual report, there is a summary of the 2021 audited financial statements, which I'm going to review with you. For those of you that enjoy numbers and reading financial statements, a copy of the full audit is available on the ACTS website or from the business office at your community. The financial performance is for ACTS in consolidation. If you think back to the organizational structure slide that Karen reviewed earlier, it includes all of the ACTS entities, including the affiliate organizations. It does not include the financial results of Willow Valley Communities. Starting first with the balance sheet, We are a large organization as measured by our total assets, which are over $2.3 billion at the end of 2021. Although we did not complete any affiliations last year, that doesn't mean we didn't experience growth, as assets increased 2% over the prior year. The largest asset is no surprise. Our property and equipment represents all of our communities and is just over $1.6 billion. With total capital investment exceeding annual depreciation, property and equipment grew over 4% compared to 2020. Total liabilities are over $2.1 billion. There are two primary liabilities: long-term debt and deferred revenue from entrance fees. Debt levels decreased in 2021 as no new debt financing transactions were completed during the year, and principal payments on existing debt were made. Deferred revenue from entrance fees increased. This represents the entrance fees paid when residents move into a community. That entrance fee is recorded as a liability, reflecting the obligation that ACTS has to provide life care services. It's then recognized into revenue over each resident's actuarial life expectancy. An increase in deferred revenue means that the amount of entrance fees coming in during the year outpaced the amount of amortization revenue, which is a favorable trend. On the balance sheet, the difference between total assets and total liabilities is our total net assets. ACTS had a healthy net asset balance of $193 million at the end of 2021. The increase is reflective of positive operating earnings that we'll see on the statement of operations. One of the most important aspects of the balance sheet that I haven't commented on is our level of cash and reserves. This was just under $550 million in 2021. Restricted reserves include reserves restricted as to use by state regulations, donor stipulations, or debt requirements. The majority of our restricted reserves fall into debt-required reserves. They decreased in 2021 as a result of project fund dollars, established as part of debt financing transactions, being spent to support the strategic capital investment in our communities. What's most notable is the unrestricted cash and reserves, which increased in 2021. It reached $390 million and represents 71% of our total cash and reserves. Moving on to the statement of operations, which in the for-profit world is the income statement. Operating revenue is quickly approaching $600 million, ending 2021 at $592.6 million. Despite the slow occupancy recovery in the healthcare centers, revenue increased 1% in 2021 over the prior year, supported by the monthly fee increase in January of 2021. Operating expenses grew at a slower pace, less than 1%. This resulted in the improvement in the operating income to $6.2 million for 2021. On the financial statements, there are below-the-line items, which are considered non-operating activity and include unrealized gains on investments. This gets added back to operating income, which provided a $13.6 million increase in net assets without donor restrictions. We're very pleased with the positive performance in 2021, especially given the change in provider relief funding. If we subtract the provider relief funding from both years, operating income would have been a loss of $17.5 million in 2020 and positive income of $3.1 million in 2021. This is an improvement of over $20 million between the 2 years. The box on the bottom shows how we use the provider relief funding each year. The majority was used to help pay for expenses, such as COVID premium pay, employee testing, contracted labor, personal protective equipment, and testing supplies. A small amount was used to offset lost private pay and Medicare revenue. Total operating revenue of $592.6 million is divided into 5 main categories: No surprise that the largest category is resident services revenue, which is 67% of the total. This includes our monthly fee payments and other resident ancillary fees. Next largest is the amortization of entrance fees at 21%. Third-party revenue includes Medicare Part A and B and a small amount of Medicaid. This is an important source of revenue and makes up 8% of the total. Investment income on our cash and reserves is 2% of the total. And finally, any other revenue, if it doesn't fit into another category, is called other, and that makes up the final 2% of the total. Likewise, total operating expenses of $586.4 million are divided into 5 main categories. Being in the service industry, the majority of the expenses are staffing related. Salary, wages, benefits, and contracted services, which is considered outsourced labor, make up 58% of our total expenses. The other categories are a bit more evenly spread. Depreciation on our property and equipment is 16% of the total. Food, supplies, and other is 12%. The fixed costs of insurance, utilities, and real estate taxes are 9%. And then finally, the interest we pay on our long-term debt is 5% of the total operating expenses. When reviewing financial statements, it's important to calculate ratios. We use ratios to measure the relationship between the components of the financial statements and to provide further insight into the financial health of the organization. The ones you see here are considered our key financial indicators. We use prior year and our budget as benchmarks. 2021 marked the second year where the budget was restated partway through the year due to the pandemic. Days cash on hand compares unrestricted cash and reserves to daily cash operating expenses, including interest. It tells us how many days could we continue to pay our expenses if we stopped receiving any more cash. Our days cash on hand was healthy at 283 days in 2021 and improved compared to 2020 and the 2021 revised budget. Capital structure ratios evaluate how much debt an organization has. One measurement is debt service coverage. This takes all of the cash collected in a given year, including entrance fees paid upon move-in. After satisfying all of our cash expenses, it answers the question, how much do you have left over to cover your debt service payments? Debt service coverage was strong in 2021 at 3.2 times coverage, well above our debt coverage requirement of 1.2 times coverage. The increase in debt service coverage in 2021 compared to the prior year was related to the increase in the number of move-ins and related entrance fee cash collected. If you recall, move-ins were suspended for several months during the spring of 2020. Debt to assets decreased to 38%, as no new financing transactions were completed during the year, and principal payments were made on our existing debt. The operating ratio compares cash expenses to cash revenue, so we want the target to be below 100%. If it is below 100%, it means our cash revenue exceeds our cash expenses. We achieved this in 2021 with a ratio of 98.7%. The lower the number, the better, so there was improvement over 2020. The operating ratio was right in line with the 2021 revised budget. And finally, the operating margin compares operating income to total operating revenue. This helps to put into perspective our operating income of $6.2 million, which equates to just over 1% of our annual operating revenue. This means for every dollar we collect, basically 99 cents is used to cover our expenses. We traditionally operate within tight margins, and we were pleased to see improvement in 2021 while still facing challenges related to the pandemic. As part of the 2020 debt financing transaction for the Integrace Obligated group, our credit rating was affirmed in June of 2021 at an A-. We are proud to be part of a small group of senior living providers that have an investment grade rating in the A or BBB category. This provides additional comfort to prospective residents and you as current residents that the organization is financially healthy. Each year at this time, we also like to share with you how we are expanding our mission and supporting our ministry. We continue to grow and expand our mission despite the pandemic. We have 4 active independent living projects, all of which are under construction, with some having units occupied at year-end. Expansion projects are ongoing at Country House in Delaware, Matthews Glen in North Carolina, Lanier Village Estates in Georgia, and Indian River Estates in Florida. The pictures you see are both from Country House. They include the finished cottages, now all occupied, and the construction of the new apartment buildings and clubhouse renovation, which is well underway. One of the ways we support our ministry is through giving. In total, through the generosity of residents, staff, and other stakeholders, total charitable giving to ACTS exceeded $5.6 million in 2021. The most popular fund is the Samaritan Fund, also known as the Heritage and Benevolence Funds at some communities. Receipts during 2021 were $2.9 million, which is net of any liability associated with a charitable gift annuity. This level of contribution exceeded the $1.5 million in monthly fee subsidies during the year. Thanks to the generosity of others, across the company there were 72 residents whose monthly fee was partially subsidized by this fund. Another way we support our ministry is through our commitment to social accountability. We collectively serve the greater community, which was highlighted in this year's annual report. The total community benefit, which exceeds $24 million, is an estimated value, which is not reflective of cash payments. Our social accountability contributions come from the donation of our time, our resources, and our physical space. Thank you so much for helping us make a difference. I'd like to share with you some information specific to the Integrace Obligated group, which consists of Bailey Chase, Fairhaven, and Buckingham's Choice. The information I will be sharing is based on the combined results of these 3 communities. Integrace, as an affiliate of ACTS, is a separate legal entity and has its own board of directors. As CEO of ACTS, Jerry Grant serves as chairman. In addition to the other members of the ACTS board, Jim Ryan, a resident of Buckingham's Choice, is a full voting member of the Integrace board. We thank Jim and all the board members for their time and expertise. Independent living occupancy at the close of 2021 stood at just under 83%. 17.5% of the independent living units turned over, which usually averages closer to 10%. This resulted in the number of units turning over exceeding the number of move-ins, contributing to the lower occupancy at year-end. Turnover is when an independent living unit is returned to inventory due to a resident transitioning to a higher level of care or a contract termination. Integrace experienced a slight decrease in the annual average occupancy in Oak Ridge Terrace during 2021, as admissions were still impacted at times due to the pandemic. Occupancy averaged 66% for the year. Willowbrook Court averaged 61% for the year. Semi-private rooms in Willowbrook Court were also made private, reducing the number of available beds during the year. Moving to the financial statement review for Integrace, I'll start with the balance sheet. Assets remained strong with over $290 million at year-end. Cash and investments decreased due to the spend down of the $33 million project fund established as part of the 2020 debt financing transaction. The project fund is being used to support the strategic capital investment in the communities. Like ACTS, the largest asset is property and equipment, which was just under $140 million at year-end. It's important to note the increase compared to the prior year. You want the capital investment in the communities to increase each year and outpace depreciation expense, which is the aging of the assets. Total liabilities were $275.6 million. There are two primary liabilities, long-term debt and deferred revenue from entrance fees. Debt levels remained fairly consistent as no principal payments were made during the year. Deferred revenue from entrance fees increased over 2020, which is a favorable trend as entrance fees collected exceeded amortization revenue of existing entrance fees. On the balance sheet, the difference between total assets and total liabilities is total net assets. Integrace had a healthy net asset balance of $14.6 million at the end of 2021. The increase compared to the prior year is related to positive operating earnings. Moving on to the statement of operations, it's hard to tell that Integrace faced the lingering effects of the pandemic during 2021. Positive operating income of $2.3 million almost tripled compared to the $800,000 in 2020. The operating statement includes other non-operating activity below the line. When you include the non-operating activity, we have an increase in net assets without donor restrictions of $2.2 million. What's even more impressive is the positive operating performance during 2021 was not supported by any provider relief funding. If we subtract the provider relief funding received during 2020, operating income would have been a loss of $1.8 million in 2020. This represents an improvement of over $4 million between the 2 years. The box on the bottom shows how we use the provider relief funding. In 2020, the majority was used to help pay for salary, wage, and benefits, including COVID premium pay and employee testing. The key financial indicators support the solid financial performance for Integrace. Days cash on hand increased to 175 days. Debt service coverage declined slightly to 1.7 times, but is well ahead of the required covenant of 1.2 times. Debt to assets remained consistent at 34% since principal payments will begin this year. The profitability ratios are directly tied to the operating statement, so they reflect the positive performance. The operating ratio measures cash activity, and the lower the number, the better. It improved to 99.1%. For the operating margin, a higher number is better. This improved to 3.7% for 2021, more than double the prior year. Through the efforts of community management, employees, and residents, Integrace had a great year financially, despite the lingering effects of the pandemic. We're looking forward to occupancy improving in all 3 levels of living and having another successful year in 2022. It's now my pleasure to turn the presentation back over to Karen.
Thank you, Sue. In summary, 2021 was a year of great challenges, but even greater successes. We never imagined we would still be dealing with the lingering effects of the pandemic in 2021 and even into 2022. As we focused on vaccines, boosters, surges, and other pandemic-related activity, we moved forward with technology enhancements that benefit both residents and staff. We announced a new method of strategic growth through an alliance, different from our affiliations done in the past. Management of the organization is committed to the ACT's mission and remains stable as succession plans were in place for the retirements that occurred. We've maintained operational excellence and realized efficiencies, allowing for positive operating results and financial performance. As a result, our financial health remains strong. All of this, combined with your support, position our organization for a bright future. We sincerely thank you, residents and staff alike, for choosing ACTS. We strive each day to earn and keep your trust and confidence in delivering on our mission. Thank you again for watching this presentation. If you have any questions, please submit them to your executive director. I wish you all continued blessings, good health, and a wonderful summer season.